Hello everyone. Today's poem is 暮秋独游曲江 by Li Shangyin. This poem was written in the last 2 or 3 years before he died. So as we know, the late life of Li Shangyin basically could be treated as a huge misery. He lost his political goals, his ambitions in his career path, in his middle age, quite earlier. And his wife, his love to his wife could be the only very few things that support his life. Unfortunately, his wife died in his age of 38. He almost lost everything. We can feel that from a poem when he went to Sichuan province. On the midway, he wrote a poem about his wife, the passing away of his wife. We can feel that Li Shangyin think he has nothing with him after his wife died. Even he led 5 or 6 years peaceful life in Sichuan province, and he didn't feel good at all. He practiced Buddhism, and he even tried to be a monk in Sichuan province. And in his poem in Sichuan province, he always expressed the hopeless. So we know when he was a teenager, he practiced Taoism, which normally was taken as an approach to the royal families, because the royal family adored the Taoism at the time. And when he get real old in the last several years of his life, he just forget everything about Taoism, and he started to practice another religion. So it's a totally change in his philosophy and his lifestyles. Even with such mishappen came to him again. He lost the job in Sichuan province, so he had to came back to Chang'an city, where his wife died. He wrote this poem in this period when he stayed in Chang'an city for months, and then he went back to his hometown in Henan province, most probably because he was really in a very poor condition of his health, and very soon he died in his hometown. So basically, that's the story of this poem of poet Li Shangyin. Qujiang, the place, is a very special place. In the prosperous Tang period, this is the most famous and most popular public garden combined with royal garden together. So we have many prosperous Tang poets writing about this place. So the Qujiang, the term, is so popular in Tang poetry. But after the Civil War, the garden basically was all became ruined, until the time of Li Shangyin's time. It's roughly 70 to 80 years gap in between. The emperor want to restore some of the glories and the entertainment in the prosperous Tang time, and he tried to restore this big, huge, beautiful garden again, but the endeavor actually failed. So the wells in Qujiang, the huge garden in the southeast of Chang'an city, for Li Shangyin basically is some buildings is half done, and vast area, the lakes, the rivers, is almost ruined. One more thing is the very famous 乐游园 is just at the same place beside Qujiang. So in the Han dynasty, this area was taken as one place, one big garden. The 乐游园 is a high-rise plateau, and below the vast land is a big garden with huge lakes, the royal palaces, the beautiful flowers. So that's why in the most prosperous time we can see so many poems writing about Qujiang as well as 乐游园. So the people they went up to the high-rise plateau 乐游园. Basically, they are looking into the far distance to the Han tomb, the pyramid-like Han tombs, to the royal palace to the north. So basically, that very easily to arouse their feelings about the country and personal ambition, personal goals. So basically, the poems writing about on the 乐游园, the high-rise plateau, is all about history or his personal political goals. And the poem write about Qujiang basically is all about entertainment or something associated with or some very personal feelings. So this poem basically is the personal feelings about Li Shangyin. And one more thing is there's not much of the poem written about Qujiang after the prosperous time because it basically is a ruined wild land. Okay, let's look at the poem. 暮秋独游曲江 李商隐 荷叶生时春恨生 荷叶枯时秋恨长 深知身在情长在 怅望江头江水声. So this is a very simple poem. Basically, the modern Chinese can read this poem very easily. 暮秋, the late autumn. 独游, the traveled tour along. Qujiang, so Qujiang, that's the place. That's the wild, ruined garden in the southeast Chang'an city. 荷叶生时春恨生 荷叶, the lotus leaf, when in the springtime it grows, and the sorrow or the hate of the spring grows as well. So here the lotus leaf is not specifically refers to the lotus leaves. It refers to everything, the creatures that bloom, that grows very lively in the springtime. So the 春恨 is the sorrow and the hate in the springtime. So which means for the specific flower or plant, it may grow less fast than others. So this plant could have his own sorrow toward the springs. Even the spring is a very beautiful, very lively season. So that's the sorrow of the spring. So this is also the simulation to a person. So for a person in his teenagers, in his youth life, just like the spring in the 4 seasons. That's the best time that a person grows and go up in the social ladder or approach in his knowledge whatsoever. So that's the best time. So the person grows just like the lotus leaf. And if he feels something sorrow, normally because he didn't reach the goal he want, or maybe he's a little bit slower compared to his peers of the time. So that could be the sorrow of the spring for a person. So the same thing for the second sentence. 荷叶枯时秋恨生. The lotus leaf dies in the autumn time, and the sorrow, the hate of the autumn, it grows, it's generated. The season of autumn is equivalent to the very old age to a man. So the sorrow of the autumn means before the man or the woman died in his very old age, when he review his whole life, he feel unsatisfied of the result of the things he or she achieved during his life. So he was not satisfied with that. So he has a sorrow and a hate for his whole lifetime story, his whole life experience. So that's the sorrow of the autumn. This poem looks very simple in the surface, and normally it was explained as a love poem or a memory to his past wife. It's very naturally when he came back to the place where his wife died and he saw the ruined huge garden, the lotus leaf is dying, and he sings something of the life and death. But I won't go further on that explanation. You can check on the internet anywhere. So they all say the same story. But for my personal understanding, this poem actually is the feeling of the Li Shangyin of himself, of his lifelong pursuit of himself, that when he was very young, he didn't achieve the level or didn't reach the expectation by himself or by his families whatsoever. So that's the sorrow of the spring. And this actually compliant to his life experience in his youth time. He didn't have a very smooth career path. He always stayed at the very low rank compared to his talent, compared to his peers. It's quite unsatisfactory when he was a young people. So when he was so old, just before 2 or 3 years before he dying, he actually lost all the interest of all the his political goals, his lifelong pursuit. For quite a long time, he did nothing but practice Buddhism or just survive. And even with such situation, he still has the sorrow and the hate of the autumn, that he didn't have a very fruitful, he didn't have a very good harvest through his life. His life is almost spoiled. He did did nothing big. He did nothing that he expected he could do it or achieve it. So that's the sorrow of the autumn for Li Shangyin himself. And we can also reference to another poem titled Qujiang by Li Shangyin as well. So in that poem, the Chunhen was mentioned, and Chunhen was associated with the declining of the Tang dynasty, and that's the surface meaning. Actually, normally the poem always has this meaning on the surface and something he wants to express. So in that poem, the thing he wants to express is his life is declining and with nothing. So that's also the same meaning in this poem, the sorrow of the spring. Because in the best time, both the Tang dynasty and himself, they achieved nothing. They didn't reach the level that they expected. 深知身在情长在. So that's the sentence just like today. I deeply understood as far as the body still exists or still alive, the feeling will always there. 怅望江头江水声. 怅望, so with disappointment, looking forward, looking into the distance, looking to the 江头, the lake front of Qujiang, and hear the sound of the lake. So basically, Qujiang is a huge lake in the main area. Don't mistake Qujiang as a river. The third sentence could be either way. It works with either way. So as far as he still lives, this feeling will always exist in the long run. So this feeling could refer to the love, the sorrow to his wife, and this feeling, 此情, could refer to the sorrow that he had toward his lifelong experience, lifelong stories. So the last sentence, 怅望江头江水声. So this is a very normal writing techniques. 还情于景. So this whole poem is writing about the feelings, but it's until the third sentence is so hard to continue in that direct writing the feelings. So he used a very typical classic writing techniques to write about the surrounding worlds, to use the worlds to represent the feelings and something afterwards. So in the very beginning, we have examined the place, this royal garden, this huge public garden, was a ruin for the moment when Li Shangyin has this tour. So he looked away to the far distance, to all over the huge lake, the big garden, the ruined garden, and which means he just equalized his feeling to this huge ruin, which used to be so famous, so popular, so prosperous a place. So from the last sentences, the walls surrounding the poet Li Shangyin we know it's not so appropriate to refer to the love between a man and a woman. It's more toward the personal goals or the fate of the country, because this garden is a part of is somewhat a resemble of the most prosperous Tang time. And when we look back to the first two sentences, the sorrow of the spring, the sorrow of the autumn. So the spring and autumn in the Chinese history, even today, it's always refers to history. 春秋, that's history. And that's of one of the very famous history book written roughly 2,000 years ago, and finally it became the alternative name for history. So from that pair of sorrows, the sorrow of the spring, the sorrow of the autumn, we can feel that this poem is the sorrow for the history. This history could refer to the declining of the Tang dynasty. It also could refer to the whole life of Li Shangyin himself, the sorrow of his whole life. So when we look to the third sentence, we know this sorrow, this feeling was connected to this body. 深知身在情长在. So this sorrow, this history of sorrow is associated with a body, with a life. Definitely it cannot be the history of the Tang dynasty. It clearly tells us the sorrow is all about himself, Li Shangyin. And when we have a second thought at the very end of his life, in the last several years of his life, of Li Shangyin's life, when he revealed the whole life of himself, he concluded that from the very beginning to the end, it's all about sorrow and hate. It's not a good life. It's not a life he won't continue. So we can see this feeling in the third sentence, 深知身在情长在. So as far as I know, when I still alive, this feeling will always be there. So it's very delicately, very sensitively express the feeling he don't want to lead his life anymore, because he cannot bear all of those sorrows through his life, those hate through his life. It's not a good life. It's not a life someone can bear with. So in the fourth sentence, the last sentences, he, with very disappointment, he looked to the Qujiang, the huge lake, and hear the sound of the lake. It's sort of the hopeless, helpless situation. At this stage, he's not capable to change his status. Even he's not capable to suicide. Just let it be. So the huge lake and the sound of lake is sort of the environment he survived with. He's lived in this environment. He very disappointingly look over to his environment. It has two meanings. He's helpless. The other thing is he gave his life. He let the environment take the full control of his life, because at this age, at this time, he's helpless. He's not incapable of doing anything. Okay, that's a sad story, and that's a very sad poem. Bye bye.